Bonjour à toutes et à tous. It's a particular pleasure to meet you here today. 3.5 years ago, in September 2021, whilst I was still a vice president in this university in charge of international affairs, I was contacted by Sebastian Bruque. Sebastian Bruque used to be the vice rector in charge of international affairs of the University of Jaén, Spain, Andalusia. And Sebastian contacted me to propose to join that the University of Tours would join the NEOLAiA University network. We already had link with Jaén. We had an Erasmus agreement, 2 or 3 exchange students a year, the occasional visiting lecturer. But the project proposed by Sebastian was much more ambitious, collaborating across all areas of the university's activities. Teaching, of course, research, but also diversity and inclusion, multilingualism, entrepreneurship, and open science. At the time we accepted, and NEOLAiA, then, 1.5 years, was designated, was labelized as a European University in 2023 by the European Commission. Today's conference introduces one of NEOLAiA's key programs, the NEOLAiA Focus Academy. It is one of the few that brings together students from all 9 partners universities. Bielefeld in Germany, Jaén in Spain, Örebro in Sweden, Ostrava in Czechia, Salerno in Italy, Suceava in Romania, Nicosia in Cyprus, Shula in Lithuania, and Tours, of course, France. But it is also a program open to all students at the Alliance, regardless of your level of study, from undergraduate to PhD level, and regarding your disciplines. You students already have the chance to meet online. You will be working together throughout this week to create podcasts and through a serious game to adopt an EU Act by playing the roles of the European Commission, the Council, the European Parliament, and so on. By the end of this week, you will have made friends. European citizenship will not longer be an abstraction, but it will be a reality. And you will be able to become fully involved in the EU of tomorrow, which we so desperately need. Well, we wanted to start this week with this conference, a conference on European citizenship and the digital transformation. European citizenship was created in 1992 by the Maastricht Treaty. It is at the heart of the evolution of the European Union from a project that was exclusively economic this Europe exclusively economic to the creation of a political and democratic European Union. So, European citizenship is granted to citizens of EU member states. It guarantees a whole range of rights, right to vote and stand for elections, freedom of movement and residence. That's why you so easily arrived here today, actually. Diplomatic and consular protection, European Citizens Initiative. And European Citizens was created at a time where there was a strong desire to strengthen the European Union, moving towards a more democratic and political Europe that might eventually become a federal state. We all know that it's not the case today. The Constitution for Europe failed. We are not in a federal state, but we have to invent something else. And this evolution was already difficult. And it's now facing the rise of digitalisation. So this conference will identify how digitalisation reshapes the exercise of rights linked to EU citizenship, at the risk of course, undermining its substance. This phenomenon is right now exacerbated by the rise of artificial intelligence, of course. And we'll also examine how the European Union and its member states are attempting to contain those developments to avoid the risk of destroying the pluralism inherent to our democratic societies. So, to discuss of those various topics, I'm very happy to have some colleagues here. Jonatán, Cruz, Ángeles from Jaén, Spain. Katalin, Kelemen for Örebro University, Sweden, and Raluca. Tell me how you say it. Okay, Onufreiciuc. From Suceava, Romania. So, to begin, the first part of this conference will be on how digitalisation reshape the exercise of rights linked to the EU citizenship. The first point we wanted to discuss today was the question of accessing citizenship. As you already know, we are European citizens if we are citizens of one of the member states of the European Union. But, of course, digitalisation is, even on this question, reshaping this question. I think Raluca could say a few words on that. Raluca. Raluca, you have to... yeah, green, it's okay.
Usually happening with the microphones. So welcome everyone. I hope you will find very interesting week discussing all these concepts. And what I wanted to begin with is that indeed what Professor Colombine mentioned very well is that the European citizenship, the citizenship in its whole, the historical concept of citizenship, it's going through a huge shift. So we don't see now only the absolute and stable bond between an individual and the nation state. We see now that in matter of access, citizens can be determined, or our status as a citizen can be determined by computational networks, by predictive algorithms, by a lot of how it's say in the literature, it's by byte by byte. So there are a lot of examples. In what regards this new concept of algorithmic citizenship, and a lot of experiments, probably you've heard some of them. For example, for sure you've heard about the social credit system from China that is actually approved by 80%. I've read an article in 2026 by 80% of its citizens. So it's very interesting that they accepted this social credit system.
Can you explain? What is it?
So every citizen in China, for example, has distinct rights depending on their score. So the Chinese state is somehow depending on the data they have on about that citizen, it's categorizing each of them in a score. And for example, you can have better access to university. You can have better access to have a loan or stuff like this. So it's very interesting, and there are a lot of examples and experiments also in India, and now they are trying to also replicate this in some African states. We have RoboDebt in Australia, and very interesting example also in the Netherlands with the Siri. Maybe you've heard. It's not the Siri from the iOS. It was called the Siri from the Netherlands. That because it was an algorithm that gave access to different welfare rights in Netherlands, depending on different categorizing again on its citizens. So, I think it's in 2020, before the pandemic, the Hague Court explained very clearly that the Siri experiment in the Netherlands was a complete failure. So it was a complete failure because it lacked the human intervention, so the human supervision. It was completely designed with not having human in the loop. And this was something that created a lot of discrimination on different types of citizens, a lot of bias. So, yeah, we have different examples, and also the NSA. Maybe you've heard, the National Security Agency in the U.S. It was one of the first actually federal agencies to implement different types of predictive algorithms in order to, using, of course, facial recognition technology, in order to categorize if you are a foreigner or you are a U.S. citizen. So basically, without knowing, you were actually categorized by this algorithm. So it's a little bit interesting to follow these developments, because it's very important that all these experiments, because that probably will be part of different experiments in the next years, are designed by protecting our fundamental rights. And so they have this privacy by design, they have this algorithm by design, from the very beginning, knowing that we have to know exactly what the algorithm is doing, and to be in a sense as transparent as they can be.
Do you want to add something on this, Katalin or Jonatán?
Well, my first thought is just that the social scoring system that you mentioned in China is explicitly prohibited by the AI Act. So in Europe, we have a completely
different.
But we will cover the
later. So it's a different market approach also in different continents. So definitely in EU, taking into consideration that we have the AI Act. So it was the first. We were the first in regulating AI, basically. Will not pass through the same experiments that we've seen in India and in China. But we'll have probably something that different types of experiments regarding other type of rights. So, yeah, the use of algorithms in the public sector is increasingly growing. So. It's important for us to know from the very beginning what are our rights, how can we trust those algorithms using in public services or stuff like this. Yeah.
I will have also a question. About
Okay.
I'm sorry. This is my first intervention, and it's a question about the transparency of this system in China. Is the information available for the citizen and from the rest of the world?
That's the problem, because we all know when we talk about an algorithm, it's like a black box. We have the black box problem. And transparency, of course, it has to be rethought. You have to think in other terms of transparency. For example, what happened in the Netherlands, because I was in a project with the University of Maastricht. What happened there in public administration? So they encouraged a lot the public, especially the local public administration, to implement a lot of AI systems in different types of public services. And what they figure out right now is that some local authorities implemented it from the very beginning, so they have this privacy by design, transparency by design, in using and in cooperating with different commercial partners in developing those systems, and some of them are completely opaque, so they completely closed for the citizens. So, and it was a major difference between these authorities. So they try to, now what they're trying to do is like to see how can we have like a common understanding of what means transparency in using algorithms in the public sectors, and what it meant, for example, in using an impact assessment, like in the data protection impact assessment that GDPR regulation, for example, imposed in 2018. Now, also, the Act imposes like a fundamental rights impact assessment when you want to implement an algorithm system.
We have the occasion to speak afterwards about those topics. And, well, we started by quite negative aspects of digitalization, but perhaps we can see if there are positive aspects of digitalization regarding the exercise of rights linked to EU citizenship. I was thinking, of course, about participation to the political life of the EU, how digitalization will help the citizen to be closer to the European Union institution, to get involved in the EU policies, the adoption of the various laws. Jonatán, do you have a word on that?
Well, if we are going to compare with China, first of all, it's completely different, thanks to God. We have the transparency in the design from the beginning, and now we are trying to understand the technology that we are developing. For example, in this case, with this mechanism for direct participation. Well, I'm a specialist in public international law, so I will try to start with the articles. I'm sorry. In some of you aren't law students, but for us it's also important. So we are going to take into account the articles 10 and 11 from the TFEU, where we are establishing specific obligations for the institutions, where we are going to establish an open dialogue for or between or among all the stakeholders that are composing our European society, directly with the EU and the legislators. We are going to go beyond the barriers of the time and the space. Like will say Celestino del Arenal, he's a full professor from Spain, that, well, this theory says that we are establishing new channels of communication and participation between the citizens and Brussels. Why? What is the change? Now we are everywhere. At the same time, we can participate. We have our own voices, and we are a real part of this new society, this digital European society. The example of China is very, very, very useful because it's completely different. It's the contrary to the European project. We want to construct or to build political interaction, mediation. We want to empower the citizens, in this case to you, the new generations, because it's very natural for you to participate through the social networks and give your opinion, have your voice, be heard, but as we can see, it's not, unfortunately, the same in the rest of the world. For this reason, we are establishing and we are developing the minimum standards in the framework of the European project that we want to develop and we want to project to the rest of the world. We are implementing ethics in our legislation, in our channels, mechanisms of participation from all the sectors of the society, just to participate actively in the design and implementation of our legislation. I have been looking for different examples. For example, we have one portal from the European Commission. It's called Have Your Say, where all of us can participate actively as users, and we are receiving thousands of contributions to public consultations just to elaborate the drafts for the future directive, regulations and decisions that are going to be approved in the framework of the EU. We have AI proposals, also about green transition, data governance, and all we have the opportunity of participate. What happens when we are trying to collect all the opinions, order it, and implement the results? That at the end, all the sectors are involved in these new initiatives. We have, for example, also related with the Article 11 from the TFEU, in this case, the European Citizens Initiative. For example, the Safe Bees and Farmers Initiative, very well known in the European Union in the last years. And also the End the Cage AIDS. Just to end with this cage of animals in agriculture. Our objective is to construct a project of European Union completely different to the initial one. In the 50s, from the last century, it was only an economic initiative. And in the Schuman Declaration, we were going to be the United States of Europe. Sometimes we don't want to recognize that we are a semi-federalistic system, but in fact, and in my case, I think thanks to God, we are. But this is my personal opinion that maybe you are not sharing with me. Well, it's a fact that the European Union impacts directly in the 80 or 90% of our daily decisions. The clothes that you are wearing, the electricity policies, our resources, how we are managed, how we are living our lives. We are the result of the design and implementation of the different policies, and we must be conscious that we have to participate actively. And I think that this could be maybe one of the major and best results of this kind of initiative like this course, that you are conscious that we want to empower your generation, because you have lost completely the faith in the future, and maybe it's the moment of, like the French people will say, repenser le futur de l'Union européenne.
This could have been the conclusion, but it's not finished yet. So yeah, of course, you show that digitalization is a way to get the European institution more transparent and to allow citizens to participate to the decision taken. But there is as well some positive implications about access to public services and an effective protection of fundamental rights. And I think Katalin could say a few words on that.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. And I like very much that on the panel we represent 3 different parts of Europe: Southern Europe, Northern Europe, and Eastern Europe. I'm a comparative lawyer, so I noticed it immediately. Instead, yes, so we decided to start with the positive aspects of digitalization, and I would like to raise 3 points. One is what you mentioned, closer, okay. Public access to digital services, and still here, since I'm representing Sweden, here where I have been living for 15 years now, the Nordic countries certainly give many good examples. They are at the forefront of this digitalization development and e-government services. We have now today actively for our citizens several governmental services accessible online, like you file your tax declaration online. The healthcare system uses extensively digital services. There is this famous 1177 that all Swedes know, the 1177, which is not only a phone number but also a web page where you can access many healthcare services. You can renew your subscriptions, you can contact your doctor, rebook your appointment, check your results of medical tests, and so on. However, when we, and then of course there are many other fields as well, even in the justice system, certain most simple things can be handled online. For example, you can file divorce online and do the complete process online without ever appearing in court or going to a public office, if, of course, if the two parties are in agreement and there is no legal dispute behind it. So there is a very extensive access to digital services, and I'm sure that also the European countries are on the same track and offer similar services. However, it is difficult to only talk about the positive aspects, so it comes quite natural to consider the risks of it as well, because access to digital services needs internet connection, first of all, right? So to benefit from these services, you need connectivity, but we will cover those aspects later on. And then the second point that I would like to raise is how digitalization, which you have already mentioned in relation to the EU institutions, but even on the national level, enhance transparency of governmental action and public powers in general. So it is easier to keep the public powers accountable. And here again, the Nordic perspective is very interesting, since in Sweden and in the Nordic countries in particular, this digitalization extends an already existing long constitutional tradition of openness of government and the right of access to public documents and public information, which in Sweden in particular dates back to the 18th century. So the Freedom of the Press Act was adopted in 1766, and it is the oldest basic law of the Swedish constitution. So it's
not obvious at all. In France, it's all tradition totally contrary to that. So we started to open and to have more transparency like very recently. So the example of Sweden is very interesting.
It is a very Nordic tradition indeed, and digitalization helped to enhance it, to strengthen it even more. It is expressed, for example, in practices like the Swedish government having a website where it, dataportal.se, where it publishes datasets, entire datasets from the public authorities, so an open data portal. And this also explains the high level of institutional trust in the Nordic countries. In whatever international survey, they really score at the top when it comes to trust in public institutions and public powers. And then the last or third point that I would raise as a positive aspect of digitalization is how it reduces, or how it can reduce barriers for vulnerable groups if these services are designed inclusively. So here I think of people with disabilities and the fact that there is a European directive that imposes on public authorities to make these websites accessible to people who have, for example, who cannot read. And on the other hand, even helping people who live in remote rural areas, so far from the cities, so to give an easier access to public services without having to travel to the cities. So these digital tools can act as equalizers for these more vulnerable groups. Yeah.
Thank you, Katalin. Raluca, do you want to add something?
Yes, that indeed the Nordic tradition, I think it was an inspiration for many countries in Europe, including Spain and including Romania, of course, and France, and take into consideration that it was necessary to have like the memorandum of transparency from Obama in 2009, and in order to have like an open government partnership in which every country, several European countries joined in from the very beginning in 2011, to have the common understanding of what transparency means. Like to have, okay, these are the transparency standards, which of course the Nordic countries did long time ago, and they were the first to promote also the open government partnership at the European level. Then we had a lot of other countries, for example France, which is, I think, from is this year also the most competitive and the one that succeeded to have the most goals, the objectives on what regards OGP, open government partnerships, accomplished for, I think, in the last 5 years. So it was like the champion, which is very interesting because even if you don't have a tradition in what regards openness, you can achieve a lot of these standards if you are open continuously and constantly to develop public policies in this relation, if you are aware of the risk, of course, that are coming with algorithms, which is also a problem of trust. People will usually not trust algorithms, or they have some issues in trusting them. So it's very interesting that we've seen countries like France, like Spain, that are Romania. It's a very interesting case because it's trying to also, Romania is also part of OGP, Open Government Partnership, like France, like Spain, like Sweden. But it has different, it lacks continuity. So from this point of view, there are still many things to accomplish in Romania. But we've seen that the legislation, it has to be continuously updated and continuously promoted to citizens in order for them to understand the actual value of transparency. So it's because there's a value for the citizen in what regards transparency. And also the China example, sorry for being so negativist from the very start, it's also for us to be aware of what can happen, and in order to be able to see if this is probably, if this will happen in some period with us. So in order to have this power of recognizing what you don't want to happen, you have to know before how this system actually works. So it's important to have this information before being part of something like this. Of course, it's not the case in Europe. It's a different market approach. So we are somehow lucky being European citizens. But it's important to know what is actually happening in other states, on other continents, because there are some examples that can have some effects on us. So, for example, China, I think 2 weeks ago declared that they want to have like the cyber citizen. So we'll have, in 5 years, we'll have a cyber citizen in China, and we don't know what exactly can this cyber citizen do. Yes, so they want to go full on AI implementation, disregarding the citizen rights, of course. So they will go with the mass surveillance in its core. Yeah.
So, good transition for the negative aspects. We have already raised some of them, but you will see that there are a bunch of others. So, negative aspects regarding the exercise of rights linked to EU citizenship. First one, main one, we already raised the question, but we'll develop it right now. Regarding the automated decision-making in public administration, but not only, and of course the algorithm bias. Katalin.
Yeah. So to say a few words about automated decision making, which is increasingly present in every country. More and more public authority decisions are being.
Can you explain what it is?
Yeah, of course. Yes. Automated decision making, you mean? Yeah, it is when the decision is taken by a machine, right, by a computer program instead of a human person. So, and the biggest risk with this, as you mentioned, algorithmic bias, which means that since these programs are working with input data, they can repeat the same biases that are already included in the data. So it is not so much a question of bad programming as rather than learning from bad data. That is the highest risk. And we find many examples. I wanted to start with the concrete examples of automated decision making. Often these kinds of tools are used in hiring processes. So, for example, recruiting people, in evaluating and ranking candidates, in admission to education, to universities or to other educational programs. So where a huge number of applications have to be assessed in a short period of time. Loan approvals by banks, also another classic example. But also public authority decisions like tax declarations. Also there a huge number of applications to be decided and checked in a short period of time. In Sweden, the Swedish tax authority, Skatteverket, makes 5 million decisions in an automated way every year. Of all kinds. So if you have, for example, a simple tax declaration, so not with particular circumstances or complications that you obviously file in online, it will fully be decided with an automated system, so that it is not, it doesn't go through a human officer or public official. But it is limited, obviously, to the simple cases. And the rule is that a decision that is not favorable to the citizen cannot be made by a machine. So in that case, a human has to make the decision. So only favorable decision can be automated.
And can you give us some examples of what is a bias?
What is a bias? Yes, the most well-known example of bias is racial bias from the United States, or already several years ago. Probably many of you have heard of this COMPASS algorithm or system that was developed by a private company that was used in sentencing by courts, trial courts in the US, in order to predict the risk of recidivism, so reoffending crimes, and that systematically scored higher African Americans than white people, while the reality showed that they did not commit crimes with the same proportion as was predicted by this algorithm. And this is also a classic example of bias produced by the input data, since African Americans have a long history of discrimination, of racial discrimination in the United States, and higher or more severe sentencing and imprisonment. This was reproduced when training this algorithm. Then another problem in relation to automated decision making is that in every public authority decision, the citizens have the right to have a reasoned decision. So they have to be motivated. There have to be a clear reasoning behind the decision, and also an opportunity to appeal against these decisions. And in order to effectively exercise your right to appeal, you need to know what were the grounds for the decision. And since these algorithms very often are black boxes, as you mentioned, that even for experts it is difficult.
Can you explain what is why you said black boxes?
That even for experts it is difficult to exactly track the process that led to that decision, to that output from a technical perspective. So which were the exact steps in the program itself to produce the output that it produced. It is especially true for machine learning, which are these black boxes. It is a challenge to motivate the automated decisions since it is not possible to know how exactly the program achieved that or produced that output and achieved that result. So then how can a citizen challenge a decision if they do not even understand how it was made? So it's still usually kept for the simplest decisions in order to avoid this problem. And the other remedy that is used for this is to create the obligation of the human in the loop that Raluca also mentioned, so that there has to be a human involved somewhere in the process that gives a final check. However, that in practice is also problematic because if we have this huge amount of decisions that are being automated, it is ordered to make the decisions quicker and more effective because the people who make those decisions or before made those decisions did not have enough time and resources to do it with the same effectiveness, with the same efficiency, and they still do not have the amount of time to check the automated decisions properly. And so not only because they are black boxes, so difficult to understand, but also because they don't have the time to properly reassess the decision that was automated. So there are many risks, even with the human in the loop in the design. Yeah.
Another major risk is regarding the impact on social media about the pluralism of opinion and, of course, then the influence of elections. We had this quite recent example in Romania that is quite scary, actually. Raluca?
Indeed, it was a very interesting example in Romania on how social media platforms can restructure democratic participation in its very simple mode said, and also how can it amplify manipulation. Especially what happened in Romania was conducted on TikTok, so it micro-targeted some, especially youth, yeah, and also people, I think, from 35 to 45. So it was a very well thought campaign regarding a certain candidate that was not so popular. I mean, it was not so present before in the debates before the elections. And actually, he managed, after the first tour, he managed to be in the second tour. So, and everyone was like, wow, how did this happen? Because we didn't see this guy in a public debate. We didn't see this guy. How can he manage to gain so many votes? And when they figured it out, he was like in top 9 trending trends on TikTok. Sorry, I don't have like a TikTok account, so it was like near to Kim Kardashian or something like this. So basically, it was very clear that it was a very well thought campaign on social media, and it functioned very well. And it also was a super interesting case regarding this candidate because it was also a platform called the Second Tour. So the platform was called the Second Tour. And what happened before the second tour is that they bought 5,000 e-gold on Binance. I don't know if you ever exchange or with the crypto assets, but what happened? It's like it was a team. We don't know exactly what team that bought 5,000 e-gold on Binance and then exchange it on another decentralized platform, creating 2 tokens. It was like the 2 candidates that were in the second tour. It was like LSG and CSG or something like this. And of course they bought more on the candidate they were they hoped that will win, the guy that I was mentioning you. So it's very interesting to see that all these examples are somehow coordinated. So there for sure had been a lot of foreign interferences in what regards the public vote and the public discourse. And of course can happen anywhere. So it's afterwards TikTok, you know that TikTok is owned by China, and now you see that probably they know very well what is TikTok doing usually. You know that probably you've heard about the Huawei case. Also, that's something that we can talk in the break period. So there are many fears regarding this new way of interfering called micro-targeting. Micro-targeting citizens in different states in order to influence directly their opinion. And on the social media, probably you already seen, you can create bubbles. So if you want like an individual to see only news about that candidate, you can only see this. So it's very interesting. So you don't have access to all kind of information, and it's somehow it's somehow okay for you as a citizen to see this kind of information, but you have to be aware about your own selections. That now algorithms are everywhere, especially on social media. So you have to be very sure that you consent to this kind of micro-targeting that can be regarding your personal choices, like how you want to get dressed or something like this, or what you want to buy, but it also can affect your public decisions, especially national vote or local vote.
Raluca, I have one question. Once we have determined that maybe we have a wrongful use of these algorithms, who is the responsible? Who is the engineer that has developed the algorithm that maybe is evolving by itself, and the engineer at this moment maybe is not understanding or following how it has evolved by itself without any supervision? Is the enterprise that there is behind the engineer? Is the public administration that has implemented this algorithm? Is the EU or maybe the local or national government that is not supervising this kind of activities?
It's a very good question. And it's a very tricky question, because indeed, on what regards liability, and it's still under discussion. For example, in the case of Romania, everyone was like, who is responsible for this? Okay, is the government, is the National Electoral Bureau that didn't imagine that this could happen in 2024 elections. So yes, I think there is to answer you strictly to this question, I think there is a solider responsibility. It should be a solider responsibility. In case of the elections, I mean, the government, of course, should have been aware that this can be a way in which you can, of course, promote your image as a candidate, but of course you have to limit, in what regards elections, these channels. So you have like all in, go and do whatever you consider it. Especially if you think about the old physical ways of doing promoting. So you are not allowed to go and give presents to citizens in order to buy their vote. it's somehow similar here. So you're not allowed to do whatever it takes on whatever platforms in order to promote you in elections, to promote your candidacy in elections. So yeah, I think it should be a solidarity, and it's a very good example. Thank you for the question. Now I remembered. I don't know if you heard about Anthropic. Do you heard about Anthropic? Claude, yeah? So Claude is developed by Anthropic. So I think 3 weeks ago, the CEO of Anthropic had a podcast in US regarding the say they work in the military part in the US. So they had like a boundary, and the US military, so the US president pushed that boundary regarding mass surveillance. And the CEO of Anthropic said, okay, this is our limit, so we don't we cannot consent to this, so not with our company. And I think in several days afterwards, OpenAI jumped in, so it was not a problem. So it's a matter of course, the ethics and, of course, of the limits of the developer in order to understand this liability and how important it's to be a common duty.
Yeah, I just want to add on this question of liability, that is exactly the reason why we have a growing amount of regulation in Europe. So all these acts, the GDPR, the Data Act, the AI Act, try to settle this issue because it hasn't been clear at all. And still today it's not easy to answer, but the AI Act puts a lot of responsibility both on the providers and on the deployers of these systems.
Is it fair?
Yeah, we'll gave a lot of example about China, Russia, and lately the United States, because the role of the GAFAM is huge, actually. And we have really two visions of the world and how the digital world should work. On one side, you have this new American point of view saying that it should be all freedom, because that kind of regulation the European Union is trying to impose is just against the freedom of expression, against the freedom of business. And from a European perspective, we have a different point of view saying that, no, if you just do everything that you want, it will be just the strongest people that will win always, you know. So we need to have some regulation in order to keep liberty and freedom for everyone, not only for the strongest. So there are actually here two visions of the world opposing then to others that are China and Russia that are more like state must control everything. So I would say three different visions of the world, but well. So just to finish on this, enumeration of the various negative points, we wanted just to raise another question, that is the impact of digitalization on the management of our external borders of the EU. I think Jonatán could say a word on this.
Thank you. Well, in the last decade, our fall from the crisis from the 2015, the crisis of migration, until the adoption of the Pact on Migration and Asylum in 2024, we have been living an evolution, a clear evolution of the policies that we are designing and implementing in the external borders of the European Union and how it works. Well, we are going to follow 3 steps. First, the identification of the person. After this, we are going to classify them in 3 different categories. And finally, we are going to manage case by case. But what happens when technology is changing everything in this process? Well, I'm going to analyze very briefly in these 3 categories. Starting with the nationals from the member states, we have the Schengen area. It's natural for us traveling among the different member states with minimal checks. we are going to bring with us our passport or maybe our IDs, and we are going to develop and implement the e-gates. For example, in Barajas, in the airport of Madrid, we have already implemented this program. We are going to catch biometric parameters, but only some of them. Maybe we are going to register the distance that we have from the nose to the mouth, or maybe the color of our eyes, the iris, just to identify all the passengers, all the travelers, but not only to get this information and manage this at this moment. We are going to try to predict how they could evolve in the future. What is the problem? The problem is the number of parameters that we are going to register, the time that we are going to conserve this information, and how we are going to use the AI just to predict how our bodies are going to change, how are we going to be in the next years, and how we are going to follow these persons and their daily decisions and projects of life in the future. But well, at this point, we wouldn't be in danger because this is the minimal check that we are still developing. And we are discussing in the EU how many parameters are we going to register now and in the short and medium term. The problem arrives when we are analyzing the excluding categories, the other two. The second one is the third country nationals. We have at this moment different softwares or systems that we have already developed in the last decade, that we have already implemented, but we are working on the interoperability of these systems. We are managing all the information from the different users and, well, I'm going to give you an example. The EES. This is the entry-exit systems. It's just to detect if the nationals from third countries have exceeded the permitted length of their stays in the territory of the member states. We are managing at this moment hundreds of millions of records per year. We are going to register the fingerprints of the travelers, the biometric data, and the biographical data. We are going to mix this information. We are going to take a profile, and automatically this system is going to detect if they are in our territories without the visa, the correct visa or the permission at day. And we have another software or another system, is ETIAS. It's the Travel Information and Authorization System that are for those citizens that needed a prior authorization before traveling. They are going, or this program is going to create an automatic alert without the supervision of a human. It's right that when it happens, you can appeal for a human supervision. But this is after the automatic generation of this decision. We are at this point, at this moment. Well, we have the third category. This is the irregular travelers that at this moment is regulated by the 2024 Pact on Migration and Asylum. And there we are establishing the screening procedure. We are going to take the biometric data. We are going to develop security checks. And we are going to develop this system more in depth in the next 6 years. We are going to determine if every user is automatically accepted or rejected. If he or she is accepted, he or she is going to get the status of asylum seeker. If he or she is rejected, we are going to proceed with return procedure. But what happened, for example, with other systems like Eurodac? Eurodac is the system that we are going to apply just to get the fingerprints for those migrants that are going to be asylum seekers. Following the content of the last reports from the FRA, the FRA, the Fundamental Rights Agency of the European Union, we have cases of migrants that are causing damages in his and her fingerprints just to make it undetectable and to avoid the match in the software. Why? Because they only have one opportunity. Once they have been registered in the system, they are going to be asylum seekers only in this country where they have been identified for the first time. So, if you want better opportunities in another country from the European Union, maybe if you can avoid this supervision system, you can try again in other member states. And it's happening now. Well, anyway, now that we have this interoperability project for the future, well, it's going to allow us to manage the data from multiple databases like this that I have been showing very briefly, to be cross-referenced in real time. Now, that's the moment where we will have to implement the artificial intelligence, where we will have to determine the liability of the algorithms when we are implementing them in this framework, and where we have the Artificial Intelligence Act that allow us to classify the different technologies depending on the level of the risk that they present. I'm going to give you a few examples. We have 4 categories. Depending on the author, if we are going to simplify this, 3 or 4, but taking into account the legislation, they are 4. The low risk, the medium risk, the high risk, and the critical risk. The low risk is when the decision is relevant for a low-risk system. In the medium level of risk, we have some irregularities that could require a second check. At this point, we could give an example, this automatized decision. The high risk, it's a danger for the security, for the migration policies or criminal concerns. For example, if we are detecting document frauds. And in the high-level critical risks, we have the threat for the public or to the public security. This is the terrorism cases. So, well, these are the categories that we are implementing, how it's changing, and now we will have to determine to empower the European citizens to be aware of our rights, to be concerned of the evolution of this legislation, and not only trying to develop the legislation in favor of us, also taking into account these marginalized categories that we have also, that are these migrants that come from third countries with these different systems.
So a system to deal with human, but a quite inhuman system to deal with human as well. So we gave you a quick overview about the various negative effects of digitalization on European citizenship, but of course we are all lawyers, so we could have the same conference made by, I don't know, neuroscientists saying that there is a huge effect on your brain some cognitive effects, of course, of digitalization, as you know. The incapacity to stay focused on the same subject more than 30 seconds and just to sweep. The fact that the development of artificial intelligence will have huge effect on your brain. The incapacity for you to develop an argumentation, to understand things by yourself. So, and we see that in the recent studies from neurobiologists, the human that we thought that would be more and more intelligent, well, should decrease now in intelligence because of digitalization. So this will be as well a huge, well, question for the coming years, for your generation mostly, because, well, our generation, before my 18 or 19, internet didn't exist. So I grew up without everything. I grew up without a phone, well, and everything. So for your generation, of course, it will be a huge question. But now that we described the positive and negative impact about digitalization, I think time is coming to show you how the European Union and the member states are attempting to contain those developments, those negative effects. And first, with digitalization, we had to adapt and we had to create new rights. Amongst those rights, there is the right to personal data protection. You know, the thing that when you go on internet, there is always a pop-up and you have to disagree or agree. This is because of personal data protection. Jonatán?
Thank you. Every time that we are developing a digital interaction, we are leaving a trace. With web browsing, the online shopping, we are geolocated all the time. We can use the health apps, or maybe we don't know that we are, that we are bringing the smart sensors. But how can we develop an European strategy, and why is it so important for us? The response and the main concept will be the power. Who has the power over our lives, over our projects, over our decisions? And what is this concept of powers? Will be the significant capacity to influence the individuals and collective behavior. For this reason, at this moment in the European Union, we are developing two different concepts. We have the right to privacy and the family life, and we have another concept completely different, related but different, that will be the protection of our personal data. We are the owners of our data. And that's the concept that changes everything if we compare with China, with Russia, with USA. But how? What are the main principles that are going to inspire this new concept? We have 4 pillars. We are going to manage this, first, fairly, second, with specific purposes, and third, on the basis of our consent. Why? Because we need to get this power of control of our data. And it means that if I want to rectify my information that is available on internet, I should. But it doesn't happen, for example, in USA. I don't know if you have tried to access Google with google.com, google.es, google.fr, google.it. The results, if you are looking, for example, for your complete name, are completely different. Why? Because Google is applying the national legislation, obviously, also the European Union legislation, and that affects is going to affect the results that we are going to get. If we are European citizens, we can ask to delete the information. But if you are accessing through .com, is the general domain where we are applying the legislation from USA, maybe you can't. This is the result, and this can change your project of life completely. Imagine that you are going to apply for an university or for a new job, and your new boss or the Department of Human Resources finds the information about your private life from a few years ago, about something that you maybe regret and you want to forget. What happens in these cases? You can't manage. You have lost the control over your project of life and the perception that the rest of the society has about you. For this reason, we are developing this concrete right, and for this reason it's so important. The rectification and deletion that is well known as the right to be forgotten. We have the GDPR in force since 2018, and we have implemented the content so naturally in our project of lives that we are not conscious of the consequences over it. We have these general principles: lawfulness, fairness, transparency, data minimalization, the purpose, limitation, and the accuracy. These are the bases. And we are going to establish also specific obligations for the providers, for the different platforms, just to notify the data breaches and the appointment of data protection officers in all the member states. All the companies, the platforms are represented in all the member states just to determine if we are going to apply the fines in the future, the sanctions, or how are we going to manage how they work. And well, we are going to see, this is the Brussels effect, these minimum standards with ethics that we are going to develop and that we are going to see if we can control or not beyond our frontiers.
So, right to personal data protection is one of those important new rights that were created, and we speak right now as well about European digital identity and citizen access. Raluca.
Yeah, but before mentioning about the IDAS, I wanted to add something that Jonatán said regarding the right to be forgotten. Indeed, is a very important right, and indeed it has like a very powerful effect until 2023 when OpenAI happened, because there's still a conflict, like an open conflict regarding the this right with the algorithms that use different public data sets in order to be trained. And it is very complicated once you were trained with specific data to do the reverse, like to untrain the algorithm. It's like very, very expensive, and actually happened many times with OpenAI that trained, you know, that the first model was in 2023, I think, or 2022, but we don't know exactly how much time before these algorithms were trained and what kind of data they were trained. So what happened to a lawyer? It was like a Brazilian lawyer, but all her work was in Europe. It's like she had a blog actually regarding like 20 years ago. She had a blog. So now we don't know the concept, but it was a blog. So she wrote different types of poems. I mean, she was somehow very active in the political side, and she wanted to delete that blog. So I asked Google to delete it. What actually happened? So you cannot find that blog anymore on the internet. But what she didn't expect, it was when asking ChatGPT about that blog, ChatGPT actually responded that, okay, this is the blog and this is what you've written 20 years ago and these were your political opinions. And she asked OpenAI directly to delete this type of information in order not to be showed anymore. And OpenAI answered that is like very difficult to do this. So we'll manage to see but we cannot assure you that this will not be displayed anymore. So the right to be forgotten here enters into a direct conflict with what regards this public data sets that were used in training these algorithms, because it's very expensive for any, yeah.
If I just may add on that, indeed it is now an emerging topic of research within computer science that is called machine unlearning. Because they are trying to figure out how to undo this process. And
yeah, because you are not GDPR compliant, so it's a problem. And the US has some history in what regards the compliance with GDPR, also in what regards data data access on European citizen data. Regarding the Cloud Act, maybe you've heard about the Cloud Act in 2018. So in the exact year when GDPR happened and it was fully applicable, the US also had like a Cloud Act in order to still give access to European data to US authorities. So it's still a problem there because you have to US authorities, and it was actually this year or at the end of last year in the French Senate, a French senator asked Microsoft representative or something like this. They were dealing with this stuff, and the Microsoft representative said, okay, so the US authorities have access to European data or not? So that was the question. And the Microsoft representative said, well, yes. So it was still, okay, so we have a lot of legal instruments, but still they are not still very effective on what regards these new challenges. And EIDA, just very, very short, EIDA, maybe you've heard about this regulation. Have you heard about European Digital Identity Framework or something? You didn't? Wallet? So it's a regulation that started like 12 years ago, so 2014, and now it will be fully applicable in November 2026, because every national member has to have this European Digital Identity Wallet to have implement in order for you to have access, like a common access to all your digital identity data or data regarding to your digital identity. You probably will see a lot of initiatives in your country regarding this, because it's mandatory that this wallet should be implemented this year. And it's very important because it will reduce, of course, administrative burdens and a lot of stuff, but it's important for you to know the exact legal framework, for you to know what are your rights and how can you take advantage of them. Yes, sorry.
Please, Raluca, could you explain very briefly for the students what is a wallet and what is applicable in the public administration and also and before the private enterprises, just to identify yourself?
Okay, so basically a wallet will be like sorry, thank you. A wallet will be like your private space, let's say, in very simple words said. So basically, you'll have like a unique access to all your data important data regarding, of course, your studies, your identification, your medical records, and all of this regarding public services, in order to, and it will be fully interoperable between all the countries. That will probably be a challenge, in order for you to have a better access when you go to another country. So you'll have like your personal national wallet, let's put it like this, and it will be very easy when you go to another EU member state for them to know exactly what kind of studies did you have. You don't have to prove anymore. So you have all these records, all placed together. So it will be very easy for you to not
just to prove your past, who you are, or no?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to give a brief history of yourself, because they already will know all your data. Yes.
And easier to have access to all your data for the other people as well.
Yeah, but it will be
and security issues as well.
It has some security issue, of course, data minimization, and another problem. But is another problem. But also, if you are the only one who have access. Maybe this will give like the trust, the needed trust, to put it like this, in order to implement it and to utilize it, because it's about using this wallet more than having it on paper.
So the last range categories of rights that were created is the need to have a right to access the digital infrastructures. So the recognition of it as a right. So Katalin will say a word about it.
Yeah, just briefly, because then it would be good to have some time for some questions as well. It is indeed a quite open question. To my knowledge, there is no constitution that would enshrine explicitly a right to access to internet. So, and it is not, going back to the first thing that I talked about, the access to public services, so it is the other side of the coin. So it's a positive aspect of digitalization to increase access to digital services, but on the other hand, it requires internet connection. And the reality is that not everybody has equal access to internet connection. Or the capability to use it properly. That is what we call digital literacy, right? Or to afford access to these services. And however, now we have some case law, for example, from the Court of Strasbourg, the European Court of Human Rights, 2 cases against Turkey where they had to decide over individuals' rights to access to. One was about access to Google sites, the other one was about access to YouTube, where the Strasbourg court framed this as a question of freedom of expression, Article 10 of the European Convention. So they claimed that there was a violation of the freedom of expression to limit access to the internet, or it also emerged in a case involving Estonia in relation to limitations for prisoners to access certain internet sites. And there instead the court framed the issue as it is possible to limit internet access, but it has to be proportionate and a necessary limitation. So using the proportionality test in order to see whether it is a violation of the convention or not. And the other aspect of this then is this digital divide, as it is called in the literature, between different parts of the population. So young people versus elderly people. If we look at statistical data, it shows that in the European Union, 46% of people aged between 65 and 74 have only basic or no digital skills. So especially the access for elderly people to these digital services can be seen as a problem. Therefore, the other side of the coin is whether there is a right to remain offline and the obligation for the government to ensure that you can access the same services even offline, so not only online, so that even elderly people have the same opportunities. And on this there is no Strasbourg case law, but we could frame it as a privacy issue. So, I found, when doing a quick research on this, that there is actually a French labor law, or on French labor law there is the right of to disconnect.
Droit à la déconnexion.
Yeah, exactly. The right to disconnect. So specifically for employees, the right to not answer emails outside working hours, right? Since 2017. But on the EU level, we don't have such thing. Yeah, I stop here.
Thank you, Katalin. This is the time to speak about what the EU is doing and what the member states are doing, so to guarantee citizenship in this context. So what kind of regulations were adopted, but we'll reduce the time, if it's okay for you, at 2 minutes each. Raluca will... 2 minutes, okay? Yeah, because if we want to have some time with the questions, then. So Raluca will say a few words about what we call GDPR. What is this?
So I just follow that Jonatán began with. GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation. Maybe you've heard about this. It was adopted in 2018. So it has several, let's say, the most important, it has several rights that have to be respected by every operator, like commercial operator, because the GDPR is applicable to natural person, so it's not applicable to a legal person. So it has the rules that the legal person have to respect in order to be sure that they respect the natural person's rights. So it was like the right to privacy, the right to be forgotten. The GDPR also reflected what you've seen now, what Colombine mentioned, the consent. So you have to give your consent. The consent is it's very important. So without a natural person consent, you cannot process personal data as an operator, as a commercial company. So you have to have the consent. So you have to have a policy on this, a cookie policy, a personal data privacy. So you have to do like an impact assessment regarding data protection before implementing all these policies, and of course promoting all these policies to natural persons in order for them to be sure that you are doing like your best in order to be compliant. And of course it has some very severe sanctions if you are not GDPR compliant. So if you do not follow and do not respect the personal rights of the natural persons. Yeah.
Thank you, Raluca. A second very important text is the Digital Service Act, the DMA. Jonatán?
Well, the DSA and the DMA in 2 minutes.
Yes, let's go.
Bon courage. Well, very briefly, we are going to determine how the big tech enterprises, companies, Google, Meta, Amazon, YouTube, and Apple, and others, how they are managing the access to the digital market, how they shape the flow of information, and third, how they are going to mediate the forms of social interaction. We are going to establish different obligations, and we are going to establish also fines and sanctions. The most important, just to give you a general idea or conception, the fines can reach the 10% of the global turnover of the company. And if they are repeating this kind of conducts, even the 20% in this member state. By one side, the DSA. There we are going to impose different obligations to these digital intermediaries. For example, from the Article 16 to the Article 20, we are going to determine how they are self-regulating the mechanisms just to be communicated with the users and control the content that could be illegal once they have noticed it's there. We are establishing different kind of companies. The most important, the very large online platforms that are regulated about, for example, what are the risks that we have with this kind of companies. The disinformation, the electoral manipulation, and we will have to protect the minors. Just not to reproduce cases like Roblox in USA. And we are going to establish obligations to the companies just to adopt these mitigation measures. For example, labels to the content or using moderators teams just to manage the information. And by the other side, the DMA, we have a new category. Is the gatekeepers. That these are these companies that are essential access points for the users and business. We are going to prohibit the combination of different personal data from different services. We are going to limit the interoperability, and it has a series of different effects. For example, Apple now allows the installation of alternative apps in our iPhones. Google is giving greater visibility to all the companies, even to the competitors. And Meta is introducing options to limit the combination of our data that are coming from different services. Basically, we are going to manage and innovation by one side and protection of the users by the others. And we have also different categories depending on the services that are giving us the platforms. But, well, I will leave this information for the questions. Thank you.
This is all about imposing the same rules in the real life to the digital world. And, of course, it will be much more complicated to have those rules applied in the digital world than in the real world. But, well. And the third one, and the last one, recently adopted, is the AI Act. Katalin.
AI Act, yes.
Artificial
AI Act
intelligence.
in 2 minutes. Yeah, I will not go into the content then, but really just focus on 2 questions. And why do we have an AI Act, and what does it regulate? So without going into the rules contained in it in itself. So yes, that's the most recent one. It entered into force in 2024, but there are many deadlines that are to come. So its complete implementation will be completed if everything goes well in 2028. So why does Europe have an AI Act? There has been this clear need of setting certain boundaries to technological development in order to ensure and prevent, to ensure the protection of rights and prevent harms that these systems can cause. So to balance innovation with protection. And also to position Europe on the global market, but not only market, but in the sense of this protection of rights, to exploit that so-called Brussels effect that Jonatán mentioned before, which means that Europe showed to be able to to influence global development by setting standards, principles that are then followed by the other countries. And there is a hope behind the AI Act that if Europe is early out with regulation of AI, it will set the global standards for ethical AI for the whole world, and the others will follow. We will see how well it will work. It is still to be seen, but that's behind the reasons for the regulation of AI. And then the second big question is what it regulates. What is AI? And I appreciate a lot that this whole focus of them is not phrased as something revolving around AI, but rather digitalisation, which is a simpler and less controversial way to putting it, because AI is a very hyped term, but there is no consensus about actually what it is. And one of the problems with the AI Act is that if you want to regulate it, you have to define it. It's not possible just to put it out there without knowing what we are regulating. So there is a definition of AI in the AI Act, and that is one of the most controversial points of it. It is a very complex, long definition. It says that AI is a machine-based system that is designed to operate with varying levels of autonomy, and that may exhibit adaptiveness after deployment, and it infers from the input it receives how to generate outputs. These are it's not even the full definition, but the most important elements of it. So machine-based, autonomous, adaptive, and using inference, so statistical inferences as a method to produce outputs. But there is no clear consensus in the technical community behind this definition. And in general, I would say that the more computer scientists I talk to, they usually dislike the very word AI because of this lack of what it actually is. So that is one of the basic struggles behind the implementation of the AI, and now we cannot go into the details, so I stop here. But there is a lot that we still have to see how it will be put into practice.
Of course, the problem with all those regulations is that science is going too fast. So the technical issues are, well, keeping always moving. So it's always very difficult for law to try to regulate something that is always changing. So this is the main issue. And there is a second one I wanted to raise as well, is the fact that after Trump re-election, we saw even in the EU this movement, this kind of backlash, saying that, well, Trump and these guys are right. There is too much regulation, and we should have less regulation in the EU. We should do like them. If we don't do like them, we'll be less competitive, and we'll lose the competition at global level. So, and this song is, well, amplifying more and more, and I think very, very dangerous. The threat is not coming from outside. It's coming from inside as well. I think we need desperately those regulations. Of course, it will make the life sometime difficult. Of course, when you go on internet and you have always to click, it's sometimes very, well, you have to to be very patient for it, but you have to be aware that all those data are just thousands of dollars for people that are using it. And it's your data, and it's a way for many other people to get money from you, you know, no matter what. Time is running, so I won't ask you the last question. We don't have time anymore, but I think that if you have questions, you students, don't hesitate to ask them. Dennis has one. If you can take the mic.
So I have a question for Mrs. Katalin. So you told us that Sweden has offering digital services to their citizens, but how does Sweden protect itself and its citizens from digital threats? And can you tell us something about your cybersecurity policies?
So, do you mean that by the government? That finds me outside of my comfort zone, let's say. For sure, it has been a very hot topic, and I know that there is a lot of investment around this, but I cannot tell you at what point they are with this development. But it is, especially in the last years, global situation with what is going on in the world and in Europe. There is certainly an increasing awareness also in Sweden. Well, they entered the NATO also quite recently, right? Which shows that security issues are on the table continuously. But to be honest, I cannot tell you the specifics of how they are working with it.
But I think it's a very interesting question you are raising here. But do you trust state to keep all those information? I think it's a little bit about this. And you can see here that there will be very different traditions if you are from Sweden or if you are from Romania or Czechia. Clearly, I think with the experience of communist period in East countries, the trust in the countries is very low. You don't trust your country because you know that during the communist period they were gathering so much data on persons, and there was so much mass surveillance and everything. Of course, in Sweden there is no tradition like that. There is this tradition of the state protecting people. So it's interesting to see that each country, regarding of its history and its culture, will have a different position regarding the state. Do we trust state to have, to be safe with our data?
Yeah, but I have to say that even though comparatively the Nordic countries have this high level of institutional trust, it is also something that has to be maintained and kept. It has been a challenge in the last years, even in the Nordic context, so to maintain that same level of trust. So there is certainly a need for ensuring cybersecurity. Yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah, I got a question for Mr. Cruz Ángeles, and if the other one wants to say something, feel free as well. You named some regulation initiatives on the European level, and you also said that it's difficult because there are always new developments and it's very fragile in general. But one could also argue that the EU in general is just reacting in this matter on the measures the big tech companies are making, and also what the US is doing, what China is doing. You also mentioned the Brussels effect, where other countries implement the same measures, or the companies itself, because we are such a big market and it won't make sense to have two different types of products, so they just adopt the EU measures. Wouldn't it also be a chance for the European Union to adopt some more serious regulation, not like just like like some standards that are somehow there, but they could be bigger? Some measures that really show our values and which ways we could transform the digitalization worldwide, to put it maybe more in a democratic way, for example, because of course other countries, they don't have to matter, but we still are a big market, and the EU can be a more active actor instead of just reacting on what's happening around us.
Thank you. I think it's a very good question, because the basis of the conception of the EU legislation on the digital single market is that we are not reacting. I know, you are not a law student, you are an engineer or something like that, maybe? No? You are from law? No, because, well, the traditional conception is that we are studying conducts from sociology, anthropology, and maybe we are going to try to regulate what is happening in the real world. That is what said Professor Colombine. And this is the traditional conception, because when we are law students, this is what the rest of the world is teaching us. But in this case, And for this reason, it's so important in this field of studies or this branch of the EU legislation, because we are trying to develop ex ante the legislation that is going to be useful in the future. Now we are trying to work in interdisciplinary teams with engineers, with sociologists, anthropologists, lawyers, just to develop the mechanisms, the tools, the legislation that we are going to need in the future, but without knowing, because even them, they don't know how it's going to evolve so quickly in the future. And we have to be prepared for the best and for the worst. So for this reason, we are trying to imagine the legislation that we are going to need, but this isn't sci-fi, science fiction. So that's the challenge that we have in the European Union. We are regulating, being the first with ex-ante proposals, being realistic, and with useful consequences and practical implementations in the real world. I don't know if I'm more or less situating the question, but...
I want to still argue that it's not, although I understand that's difficult, but we still argue that it's not enough and not fast enough how to use regulation, because we can mention some negative aspects of digitalization, and we can already see the bad effects in many of the countries. So.
Well, the European Union, the project of the European Union is the result like a species of laboratory, and for this reason the project of this international organization is so unique. We have tried to replicate the EU in Latin America, in Central America, in the South America region, and it has not been possible. Why? Because the difference is that we have been implementing different measures and mechanisms for the last 70 years, and now even if maybe, and this is the critics, if we are not arriving, we can change and respond very quickly, because we have very flexible mechanisms and tools. And maybe if we can't prevent what is going to happen in short or medium term, we have been developing the mechanisms that are going to be useful just to respond to this way that is going to happen. So we have the basis of our legislation from the 50s, after the Second World War, that we are reinterpreting to the light of our times, and we have new mechanisms and legislation that we are applying specifically. So we have the general principles, and we will have the specific legislation that is already developed, and if everything fails, we have the EU institutions behind that are going to develop the mechanisms that are going to be necessary. I don't know if you agree with me, or it's like legal theory.
Totally agree with you. And I think it's also a matter of thinking how should the European Union change in the next years? And I think this is a current debate, and to see the level of integration, if the level of integration should change. There was a whole debate regarding the EU army. You've seen probably, and I think if you want as an international organization to have more concrete measures implemented, you also have to change something. I mean, to change this level of integration and go further, maybe on a Constitution of Europe that was discussed before the Treaty of Lisbon. I mean, I don't know if it's possible right now, taking into consideration that there are a lot of open conflicts and every country is thinking a lot on its own its own security and on its own resources. But if you want to have like a common defense regarding not only on the military side, but like a common defense on these threats, on all these digital threats, maybe rethink as an European Union, how should I be in the next 10 years? More integrated or more separated? I don't know.
Okay, so I have a question about the right to be forgotten and AI. So I think it's more for like the Professor Raluca. I wanted to know why, like, the EU cannot make agreements or laws to force OpenAI or other type of AI company to erase those information, because the fact that it is very expensive, it doesn't seem like a good explanation to not do it. And also maybe if they cannot completely erase it, why maybe they can program the machine to not be able to talk about it, because it's already the case for certain subject that the AI is programmed to not be able to talk about it, or maybe to like limit the access to certain information from certain areas. So I wanted to know if there is like a possibility.
Thank you for the question. Indeed, sometimes OpenAI and other companies like this prefer to pay the fine than to do the reverse because it's cheaper. So they know that they are not GDPR compliant. So they know this. So they prefer, okay, I can support the sanctions, so I'm fine. But indeed, this is like a recent conversation regarding the kind of information that can be displayed, taking into consideration that there were several, I think it was on Elon Musk's platform, the discussion regarding some explicit information about explicit images. I don't remember exactly how it's called, the platform of Elon Musk. You know exactly? It's the LLMs. It's Grok. Sorry, it's Grok. It's Grok. So it began with the discussion began with Grok, and then they say, okay, we should limit what kind of information because now ChatGPT can be accessed also by minors. So you don't have minors that have an email can access ChatGPT. So if the information that will be displayed there, for example, it should not be seen by a minor, so they try to somehow limit this. I don't know exactly how they will limit this kind of information that are personal information. For example, in the example that I gave you, it was a blog. So basically the blog was deleted by Google, but it was still in the data sets that OpenAI used for training. It's still under discussion. So, and they have several requests regarding this. Maybe they will retrain. That's another thing, because it's easier to retrain than do the reverse. So they will retrain on extra information that will not display directly the information that it was not supposed to be displayed. Yeah.
Well, Konstantinos, very short one. It's just that otherwise the students will have all the queue to go to have lunch. So we can discuss it around the lunch together. So thank you very much. Thank you to my colleague here for this conference. Just wait. Before to go, I just want to thank the students that were there, the students of the Master Juriste Européen. Thank you for coming. You can share your feedback here. You have the QR code. So don't hesitate. If you need, mostly online, to have some certificate of attendance, don't hesitate to ask them. Okay, I don't see them. So thank you for the thousands of people that must be online, of course. The millions of them. For this afternoon, we'll meet at 2:00 p.m. So you have plenty of time to have lunch. And we'll meet at the first floor of this building, in room B123, I think. But it's on your schedule. So it's in this building, first floor. So thank you for your attention, and bon appétit.